How's it going, everybody? Gaurav, Bhatt and Mihir, Vasavda here. You're listening to the Express Sports Podcast. It's game time. Every June and July, close to 180 cyclists cover 3,600 kilometers throughout France and bordering countries. It's the Tour de France, the most prestigious and difficult bicycle race. It lasts for 3 weeks and consists of 21 day-long segments or stages. The cyclists alternate between clockwise and counterclockwise circuits. Now, 250 towns apply each year to host a stage of the tour. Other than the cyclists, there's a mobile village of 4,500 organizers, technical staff, publicity caravan workers who are following them along the whole route. There are flat roads where cyclists sprint, reaching speeds up to 50 kilometers per hour. Then they pass through the Alps and the Pyrenees with stages so high that many unacclimatized onlookers may even begin to experience symptoms of acute altitude sickness. All this just for that swig of the champagne at Champs-Élysées in Paris. It's glorious. It's Tour de France. Mihir, on the show, on podcast, we have earlier discussed about tennis. We have such vocal tennis fandom and such great tennis superstars, but eventually it only comes to life when those 4 Grand Slams even take place. Cycling में तो और भी उल्टा है. There's just this one holy grail of cycling, isn't it?
Absolutely, Gaurav. You have other races like Giro d'Italia and some others, but nothing matches Tour de France, isn't it? Even someone like me, जो बिल्कुल भी cycling follow नहीं करता है, even normal days में मैं cycle ज़्यादा नहीं करता हूँ, बिल्कुल नहीं करता हूँ, in fact. But I wait for these 2 months. I don't watch it the whole time, but I do ensure कि मैं थोड़ा सा at least follow करूँ, because I don't know, just एक charm सा है. I mean, apart from the whole beauty of the French countryside, there is something profound to this sport. कुछ जो उसका difficulty and intimidating sight जो है, that is magnificent from a competitive point of view. It's almost like running marathons like 21 days in a row, right? And वो भी uphill सारे. It's crazy. And as we'll be discussing today, it's not just about the race. It also is about everything that happens surrounding it.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I called it the most prestigious, the most difficult bicycle race, but it could very well be one of the toughest endurance events across sports. अब जहाँ पे तुमने बोला यार मिहिर कि मैं इतना ज़्यादा फॉलो नहीं करता हूँ, but still you're always looking out for important events that happen and the riders who are in there, any spectacular finishes. But even if you're not a cycling fan at all, if you're just a casual sports fan, इस साल something happened that you definitely have watched at least 30 seconds of Tour de France, अगर पहले कभी भी नहीं देखा होगा तो. On the opening day, an enthusiastic fan caused a major pile-up. This spectator was holding up a sign, a placard with Ale Opiomi, let's go grandfather, grandmother. And she wanted to be on the camera. She realized she was on the camera and she leaned sideways. Track pe hi aa gayi almost. And because her back was to the peloton, the group of cyclists fast approaching, she didn't realize that the placard knocked off German cyclist Tony Martin. And it was Jenga after that. It was dominoes because, like I said, 50 kilometers per hour pe ye log yaar cycle chala rahe hain. And when the first one falls, it's a fantastic piece of video. Of course, it's also very agonizing to hear about all the cyclists and all the injuries. But just those 2-3 people who managed to be ahead and escape this major cluster, and they were trying to look back and trying to identify what exactly happened. कि opening day में इतना क्या भयानक हो गया कि हमारे सारे दोस्त लोग पीछे लुढ़के पड़े हैं. But this major pile-up, almost wiping out half of the peloton. The commentators who were calling the action on the news feed, first they couldn't even make heads and tails of it. कि हुआ क्या यार? It seemed such an innocuous start, and suddenly why is half the peloton on the road? And it was when they showed replays, when they showed the helicopter shots, the footage from overhead, it was then that they realized that something this major had happened. This from the own words of one of the commentators.
Oh, a huge crash at the side of the road. I don't know what happened there, but everyone has come down. The entire peloton has crashed.
So this fan, this quote-unquote stupid fan, she's on the run. The authorities have already stated that they want to sue her. They're tracking her down through Facebook. They've asked all the people who were standing there politely, जो नहीं घुस रहे थे cyclists के आगे, to help identify this perpetrator, anybody who saw her, anybody who knows her. But Mihir, this again brings to fore this whole, I don't know, calling it a charm अभी थोड़ा बहुत ज़्यादा dicey होगा बोलना कि charm, but this has been another one of those signature characteristic of Tour de France, isn't it? कि आसपास हमेशा आपके fans रहेंगे. It's almost like fans के बीच में से आप निकल के जा रहे हैं. And normally it has added to the beauty of the sport. Generally, if you're looking at it on a surface level, but कई बारी काफी ugly incidents भी होते रहे हैं यार ऐसे.
Gaurav, ये incident at least it comes at a time जब the entire sporting world in fact was mourning that fans नहीं थे stadiums में, grounds पे. And in a way, everyone was looking forward to having fans back. I'm sure those cyclists at Tour de France, they'll be rather happy with fans not being there. अगर जो ऐसी हरकतें करने वाले, like you said, उससे sue भी कर रहे हैं. She's on the run, but it is quite crazy जो हादसे किस्से Tour de France में होते हैं. I mean, the fact कि this incident won't even rank as the topmost act of stupidity on the tour itself goes to show कि कितने सारे ऐसी चीजें हुई है. The biggest of them, of course, being the doping scandals and all, but there have been crazier incidents as well, right, Gaurav?
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, in 2003, and this is what I was reminded of, in 2003, American rider Lance Armstrong, that's a name you've heard before, that's a name you're going to be hearing a lot more on this episode later, but his handlebar got caught on a fan's musset bag. अब मैं बताऊंगा आगे क्या होगा, आप खुद भी गेस कर सकते हैं क्या हुआ होगा, बट ये musset bag है क्या? जनरली जब हम फैंस की बात कर रहे हैं, इट्स अ डबल एज स्वॉर्ड. अ लॉट ऑफ फैंस आर देयर इन सपोर्ट, जैसा कि मैराथन्स में आप देखते हैं, दे कैरी musset bags जिसमें कुछ चीजें होती हैं which cyclists don't usually even pick up, but still it's a sign of goodwill and gesture. But this bag got tangled with Lance Armstrong's handlebar. It brought Armstrong and his bike to the ground. He got back up quickly. He was super quick in the recovery. But TV analyst Paul Sherwin that time described it as Lance Armstrong almost lost his manhood on the crossbar. It was that close. But that was the incident that I was reminded of. But ये तो चलो inadvertent हो गया. ये silly mistakes or stupidity भी बोल सकते हैं. But there have been instances where malicious morons, they toss nails and tacks on the roadway. This happened in 2013, even in 14, where at least 30 riders had punctured tires. And वो इतना ज़्यादा it becomes कि अरे यार ये तो Tour de France के fans हैं तो ऐसा होगा ही होगा. It's such a crazy lineup that shows up there. It's almost like a Halloween event, fancy dress competition. It's like they go into a shop and then they start panicking कि अरे यार कोई भी dress whatever, I'll just find something. Usually they turn up naked also. They streak, they're wearing devil costumes, mankinis. And yeah, other than that, they have tossed nails was also another instance. And this again points to zany, bizarre world of cycling and in particular Tour de France, where fans started doing graffiti of penises all across the roads for no reason whatsoever. जहां से लोग जाने वाले हैं, I mentioned the 250 towns that they sign up, they want to host the race, और उसी टाउन के बाशिंदे जो हैं, then they go ahead and उन्हें पता है 2 दिन बाद से यहाँ से peloton जाएगा, तो they draw these giant, I don't know if that's the word I should be using, but they draw these huge, that's not another word, I'm stumped, but they draw big penises on the road. And they have a specific squad, the Tour de France organizers do, whose job is to be there in advance 2-3 दिन पहले रोड पे देखें कि कहीं पे कोई ऐसा ड्राइंग, ऐसा ग्राफिटी नहीं है, and then how to salvage something out of it, how to cover it up, how to make a submarine out of a penis and other art forms that I don't want to divulge, but वो बेचारों का भी थोड़ा बहुत ज्यादा काम है, जो काफी ज्यादा understated heroes हैं. But that has been the problem. अब ये आप इसे ऑलमोस्ट डेनिस द मेनिस टाइप देख सकते हैं, ऑलमोस्ट काफी ज्यादा इनएडवर्टेंट, जैसा मैंने बोला, स्टूपिडिटी है. बट देयर हैव बीन वेरी नेफेरियस रीजंस फॉर क्राउड टू बी इंटरफेयरिंग आल्सो, बिकॉज दे हैव एट टाइम्स ब्लॉक्ड द पाथ ऑफ द रेस्ट ऑफ द पेलेटॉन. अगर कोई फ्रेंच राइडर लीड में है तो व्हाट दे विल डू इज दे विल स्टार्ट ब्लॉकिंग ऑल द अदर राइडर्स. 1975 was the absolute worst episode of crowd interference when a fan punched 5 times Tour de France winner Eddie Merckx in the kidneys during the race. Now Merckx finished the stage, but he had absolute no chance of recovering or even winning the race that time. So that has happened, and उस समय मेयर exactly वही बात है कि ये तो यार अभी तो there's a lot of halabaloo around this spectator because the entire physical comedy and the comedy of errors around it, yeah, go grandfather, grandparent, here you are, and this is a tribute to you. But like you said, 3-4 साल बाद में यहाँ पे might not even rank in the top 10 incidents that the crowd has affected upon the tour.
Absolutely. And the Eddie Merckx incident that you referred to, I think it will be, if our listeners will simply just Google search it or watch the video, they'll get a sense of how crazy the situation can get. I mean, I have the video right now playing in front of me, and it's Eddie Merckx on a bicycle. I don't know, मतलब 2 foot भी नहीं होगा gap between him, and on both sides he's surrounded by fans. He's just riding his way through. He's about to finish the stage, which he's going to top, and suddenly someone punches him. And if you look at the video, तो ऐसा नहीं लगेगा कि punch ज़्यादा vicious है या powerful है. But because Eddie Merckx is riding his bike at an insane speed, obviously the impact would be huge. And he lost time, he lost his spot on the classification places, and the race which he was supposed to win, he lost. No major injuries, but still it wasn't a result that anyone expected because of that one punch. And Gaurav, just to add to the list of incidents that you mentioned, it's not always human beings. 2007 में, I remember, there was this incident जहाँ पर एक stray Labrador walked onto this route and came under a cycle. And that again caused a pile-up of sorts, not like the one which we saw last week, but it did really have a couple of cyclists falling over each other. Luckily, no one, including the dog, got injured. But I mean, it's just one of those crazy things again that happens on tour, and which is bound to happen when you are riding thousands and thousands of kilometers on roads, not a classified track. It's just a street race. So these are incidents होने ही हैं. Gaurav, you seem to follow cycling more than me, at least. My knowledge is extremely basic and ऊपर से. But how has this evolved over the years in terms of cyclists and the fans' ka relationship? Despite all this, there has been no real attempt to kind of keep fans away, put barricades and stuff like that, isn't it?
It is one of those things, यार Mihir, where we talk about very antiquated sports traditions, जैसे कि विंबलडन में भी देखा जाता है, अभी भी कई चीजें हैं which don't make sense. इसमें भी evolution, when we talk about evolution, there can't be a better example than Tour de France. But that is on-track evolution, and we'll get into it. We'll get into the sort of preparation it takes for an athlete, for a cyclist, the sort of technology and sports science and their equipment that has evolved. But ये जो बात है, this is still so arbitrary कि now the cyclists have, their hand has been forced, and now they have had to come up and have this symbolic protest saying कि यार we need better safety. Not just because of this particular incident, but a lot of our cyclists, they held this symbolic protest on Tuesday after there were more crashes on Monday. Of course, the spectator crash that we are talking about was on Saturday, the opening day. There was another crash there. There were 21 total injuries on Saturday.
Yeah.
Monday को फिर से काफी सारी injuries हुई, काफी crashes हुए. And there, they held this protest कि boss, do something about the safety. But to answer your question, उतना ज्यादा वैसा नहीं हो पाया जैसा क्रिकेट में हमने जो एवोल्यूशन देखा है मिहिर के. क्रिकेट में हम पुरानी वीडियोस देखते हैं, सडनली यू नॉट इवन सेलिब्रेटिंग योर विनिंग रन्स, और वो धोनी का 6 तो भूल ही जाओ जिसमें 10 सेकंड का उसने फॉलो अप लिया है, वेटिंग फॉर ऑल द कैमरास टू फिनिश, एंड ही इज जस्ट basking in glory. वहां तो you hit the winning runs, you take the wicket, and then you are running for your life because so many spectators would jump in on the ground and they would.
1983 World Cup final, no?
Exactly.
I mean, just abhi recently uski anniversary thi, and we saw the matches and we saw what happened after the match was over. So
yeah, it seems so weird, so zany, because abhi to it's all very sanitized and for good reason. But to answer your question, tour पे यहाँ पे इतना ज़्यादा कुछ फर्क पता नहीं चला यार. It's up to them, it's up to the spectators to behave. Of course, authorities थोड़ी ज़्यादा vigilant हैं. The police officials are there. पूरा French government का full fledged support रहता है organizers को, and they have full authority की sanction करने से लेके even to riders, to cyclists, to even the spectators that are causing interference. But still, like we just सॉ ये स्पेक्टेटर अगर चाहे तो बिल्कुल पेलेटन के आगे कूद सकता था. एंड इनका तो खाली प्ले कार्ड सामने आया था. वी हैव हैड इंसिडेंट्स वेयर पीपल and they do it for a reason, they do it willingly. They play bullfighters with the cyclists where they'll you know have that red flag suddenly and they'll wave it off as soon as the cyclist crosses. And again I keep mentioning the speed at which these guys are cruising कि उनके पास उतना रिएक्शन टाइम भी नहीं है कि यार पहले तो बच जाए वही काफी है, तो लड़े कौन ही किसी साइकिलिस्ट से. कई बार होता है कि क्रैश होने के बाद में द साइकिलिस्ट also get into fisticuffs with the crowd, but generally हुआ नहीं है ऐसा. This has been one incident where this is one field where they're still lacking. But we are ripping on the spectators, on the fans. Again, like you said, this was supposed to be the triumphant return. Last year August में postpone हो गया था tour, and to be honest हमें तो realize भी नहीं हुआ कि Tour de France भी हो गया, इतना whirlwind 2020 गया था. But now there were thousands of fans gathering at the side of the road to enjoy the racing. Lockdown restrictions had been eased, and एक स्पेक्टेटर की वजह से अभी दोबारा से हम पूरे गड़े मुर्दे उखाड़ रहे हैं कि यार देखो क्या क्या करते थे. बट cyclists haven't exactly been in the clear also ना. And we will get into the doping bit and कितना ज्यादा seriousness वो सब करा है. But राइडर्स मतलब ये ताली तो कम से कम 2 हाथों से ही बजी है यहाँ पे. राइडर्स हैव आल्सो बीन अप टू नो गुड.
हाँ यार, एंड साइक्लिस्ट इसमें लाइक यू सेड दूध के धुले हुए तो बिल्कुल भी नहीं है. इनफैक्ट वो लोग कुछ नहीं तो ड्रग्स से धुले हुए हैं. It's just impossible to talk about Tour de France and cycling without actually talking about the dope cheats and everything that happens behind the scenes with the cyclists themselves. I mean, of course, we know the story of Lance Armstrong, and at this point also, I think it'll be worth recommending this book called Seven Deadly Sins. It's by this journalist called David Walsh. It is one of my favorite sports books for the reason that it not just highlights the beauty and the challenges of Tour de France, but it also takes a deep dive into the ugly side of it, the whole drug and the doping part of it as well. And these stories are, if you're talking about sports doping, then Tour de France is a revolutionary event in that sense, because every year there was a stage, there was a phase where every year they came up with new techniques, revolutionary techniques to ensure the cyclists were drugged and they had performance enhancing substances in their body while they were cycling. One of the biggest events was when a doctor with a French team called Festina was found carrying vials of EPO, a human growth hormone, to the start of the tour, and it led to this massive raid. उसके गाड़ी में से उसके traveling entourage के पास से they found loads and loads of vials of EPO. And there were raids at team hotels, hotel rooms, and it was regarded as one of the biggest drug busts in sporting history. It wasn't just him. If you read Seven Deadly Sins, you'll also read stories about how they carry EPO in mini fridges. And overnight, वो लोग administer करते थे ये drugs so that people remain fresh and they are able to negotiate with the challenges that the tour throws at them. So yeah, Lance Armstrong, of course, is synonymous with Tour de France and for cheating, but he isn't the only one, of course, and there are stories replete with cheating in Tour de France. So much so that every rider who wins the tour, or even a stage of this tour, he is seen with this massive skepticism.
Yeah, Lance Armstrong, listeners, if you aren't aware, he was the poster boy for Tour de France and 7 titles. But in October 2012, he was banned for life, stripped of all his titles, even though he was under scanner since 1998. Kafi time se there were questions and he would always lambast said questions and he would come out shining. But 2012 May, all his titles were stripped because this investigation concluded that he had engaged in a massive doping scheme. He later admitted to doping in an interview with Oprah Winfrey. And there's a very brilliant comedy routine by Bill Burr, and he was on the Conan show where he said, our roided up guy was beating your roided up guys because everybody was roided up in those Tour de France. So, it was still even. And it was very tongue-in-cheek, but Lance Armstrong being Lance Armstrong, he invited Bill Burr. He was so happy that you are taking my side. Chalo, mere bhi podcast pe aa jao. But that was the scenario, because that entire generation, the span in which Lance Armstrong was winning these titles from 1998 to even 2012, जहाँ पे उसका ban announce हुआ, 21 out of 22 champions were implicated in doping for one reason or the other. And it's not just Tour de France cyclists, mind you. There is an American rider called Cale Leogrand, and he was caught in a doping scandal after it was alleged that he used ordinary laundry soap on his hands and then he urinated on his hands. So his urine apparently, I don't know, it didn't flag, or at the end it did flag, because that's how he was caught. Earlier also, authorities have said you're in trouble because there was a rider called Michel Polentier, and he was caught trying to cheat drug testers with a balloon of clean urine hidden under his armpit. And it would be just so tricky.
Yeah, creativity के full marks तो.
मतलब मेड 17th आ जाओ यार, मतलब ये सब क्यों इतना, तुम इतना प्रैक्टिस भी ये सब, उसके बाद में अपना यूरिन का बैग लेके बगल में दबा के बगल में छोरा गली में ढिंडोरा हो रहा है आपका, बट आप 18th 19th आ जाओ यार, just be there to be a participant. But there have been such scandals, and there have been some innocuous ones also, because Italian cyclist Mario Cipollini, he used a very natural method to boost his male hormone supply. He taped a picture of Pamela Anderson to his handlebars, and apparently that worked for him. Back in 1904, when the tour started, it was such a wild west ki riders all the time they were riding in slipstream of cars. Slipstream मतलब कि अगर कार जा रही है तो उसके पीछे पीछे आप आओगे तो एयर रेजिस्टेंस कम हो जाएगा. They were getting toes from cyclists who weren't even in the race. कई लोग तो कार में हाथ लगा के आगे चले जाते थे, और एक दो राइडर तो ट्रेन में बैठ के एक स्टेज से दूसरी स्टेज जाके फिर उन्होंने अपनी साइकिल नीचे उतारी. तो it has been such a competition with such bizarre zany history. But just to bring us back home, and at the top of the episode we mentioned how it remains one of the most challenging endurance tests for humankind, for athletes, and it is for a reason, because these riders, the sort of energy they expend, their immune system is a bust by the end, because they are very prone to illness. They have pushed their body to such limits. The food, the diet that they are taking, on average a Tour de France rider consumes 23 to 25 megajoules per day, that is 5500 to 6000 kilocalorie, which is more than double the average daily calorie intake required by most people. So many meals. और जब आप रेस्ट डे होता है, एक वो रेस्ट डे आपका पूरा मसाजेस में, एक्यूपंक्चर में, इस सब में चला जाता है. एंड योर माउंटेन स्टेजेस आर ऑल्सो, you expend a lot more, and the average power output that these cyclists apply to their pedals in their 30 to 60 minute ascent of mountain passes, it can be upwards of 450 watts. To put this in perspective, the average recreational cyclist like us, we may be able to hold this power output ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा 30 सेकेंड या 2 मिनट के लिए. So it remains one of those challenging, one of those holy grail, like you could call it, for cyclists and for cycling. That's why Tour de France, we still talk about it, even though it has such a checkered past. है ना Mihir?
हाँ, and I think this is also the reason why we tune into it every time the tour starts. एक तो वो hope और optimism है कि यार चलो इस बार कम dope cheats रहेंगे. Like I'm hopeful this time because we're recording this on Wednesday, and on Tuesday Mark Cavendish won the stage in a dramatic fashion. Mark Cavendish being this very celebrated cyclist, Olympics में काफी कुछ किया हुआ है, Tour de France में उसमें मतलब काफी दिग्गज है, and he is one of those clean riders. So eventually you hope कि guys like him will win ahead of the rest of the pack, जिसे हम हमेशा थोड़े मतलब शक भरी नजरों से देखेंगे. And the way you describe the whole challenge of this, right? I mean, that's why it becomes so special when a clean rider completes the entire Tour de France. Whether he wins or loses, it's a different thing. But it just shows कि कितना level तक का endurance है human beings में, and the challenges that can be conquered. So I think for that very reason, apart from the stunning sky sights that the cyclists pass through, right, from day 1 to day 21, crazy countryside and cities that they pass through. It's visually stunning to watch, and also extremely challenging mentally, physically for the cyclists. So ये सारे crazy events जो होते हैं, this lady of course adds to this whole buzz and fun and drama to it. I'm sure the cyclists don't see it that way, but from a spectator's point of view, it's fabulous.
Absolutely. And let's take this moment to bring in producer Shashank, who is a recreational cyclist. And Shashank, what did you make of the video? Because I'm pretty sure, even though हम फिर से वो disclaimer 1000वीं बार देंगे, casual sports fan, blah blah blah, but this was something that went viral and everybody was tuning in. What was your take when you first saw the video, and what's your take on the entire Tour de France, saga?
Yeah, you're right. Like so many others, I also watched the video, and it's just horrific. Like if there's anyone who's not watched the video, just watch the video just to see the kind of pile-up that happens. There's so many cyclists and, you think कि, you can't even imagine कैसी injuries हो सकती हैं. And talking about injuries that जो cycling में हो सकती हैं, you mentioned at the beginning that this is one of the toughest endurance tournaments, right? But apart from that, now I'm thinking, is it also one of the most dangerous sporting events? Like people fracture their femurs, pelvises, collarbones, cheekbones. Like apart from the fact that it's physically so tough, you also have people punching cyclists in their kidneys. Like what the hell is happening here? You have people drawing penises on the roads. Somebody gets sideswept by a car, thrown into barbed wires. And on top of that, of course, you guys mentioned that there's that entire doping scandal. So I'm thinking apart from it being a really tough endurance challenge, it must be one of the most dangerous or at least controversial sporting events, right?
Easily. And actually, when you mentioned the fractures and everything that the cyclists go through, I think one of the most gross images that come out of every Tour de France is at the end of every stage is cyclist ke calves, yaar. Like there are these lumps jo create ho jate, like dozens of them on their legs. It's just an absolutely grotesque sight.
Yeah. And there's also like some of the stories you hear, right? Some of the, like I was once, I don't remember who it was, but this cyclist was mentioning that he was part of this relay race and he fell and he broke his pelvis. And immediately a doctor came and he said, okay, you won't injure it further and you'll just have to suffer a lot of pain. So if you can cycle more, you can. So, keep hearing these incidents that the kind of pain they have to put themselves through, because in that case, that particular cyclist, he was in a position that because he was part of a relay race, if he didn't cycle further, like his entire team would lose. So he completed the race with a broken pelvis. And you hear these kind of stories and you are just blown away by the kind of things that people would do and put themselves through for the love of the game or, just to win.
Such an emotional roller coaster, yeah. That's why it's always so fun to talk about Tour de France, because even though we have mentioned this incident, the latest pile-up that happened, should be noted that German Jascha Sütterlin, he had to pull out of the Tour on the very first day, and we can't even understate the sort of practice and the training that it must have taken for him to reach that, make the team and be there on the starting line, the sort of physical overhaul that he must have had to go through, because they have to remember they have to lose muscle mass as opposed to many other sports where you have to gain muscle mass to increase power. These guys lose their muscle mass. They add milligrams, they subtract milligrams from their cycles. Pura aerodynamically it's engineered and actual rocket scientists work on these cycles. So it's very heartbreaking. It's also very, I don't know to use the word, it's very fascinating, and I think I'm using the word here काफी सही time पे, because this entire world of Tour de France, it's very zany, it's very unbelievable at times, but it's very fascinating. It's always good to talk about it. Listeners, before we wrap up, just one thing that we haven't done in a long time. There's one book that I would like to recommend. It's called Road to Valor. It tells the story of Gino Bartali, who was an Italian rider. In 1938, he won the Tour de France. He won the Tour de France again a decade later in 1948. In 1950, when he was this accomplished veteran and he was trying to win one more time, French fans threw rocks at him and knocked him to the ground because he was an Italian. And that's not even the biggest part of the story. Between the two Tour de France titles in 1938 and 48 was his major accomplishment during the war, where he hid a Jewish family in his cellar. He was carrying messages to the Italian resistance while on his bike during the World War, that is. And it's such a great story, and I think it makes for a very good read. So do check it out if you have some time. Do check out all our episodes. Game Time comes out every Saturday. Stay tuned. But more importantly, stay safe. Adios.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.